Welcome back to Breaking Black Podcast. You are here with your host, Tina G and Fancy Arlee. I wanted to kind of tackle, some conversations about parenting. And one of the things that I wanted to talk about on this episode is harsh parenting and, essentially some of the traumas that I definitely feel like are passed down generationally. I think that this happens with people, in all kinds of different circumstances in the world. But I think when it comes to African American communities in particular, because we're faced with so many other, types of traumas, a lot of the things that we see just happening in society, oftentimes I feel like it's really hard for us to kind of work through those spaces if we are coming from a space where we may have had, tougher parenting or, identify with what they call, tough love. So I was recently having a conversation with one of my relatives, and we were essentially talking about tough parenting or tough love. And I kind of mentioned that I felt like I don't necessarily know that there is such a thing as tough love. I'd love to know your thoughts on, tough love. Do you think that, that's an adequate space to parent from? Do you think such a thing exists, or whether or not if it's healthy?
It's a conversation that I've had many a times with my partner and with friends of mine. Um, I feel like, especially being raised, in the 80s and 90s and things like that, I feel like our parents were still in that spanking era, you know what I mean? So if you looked at them crazy, you're getting beat down. If you said something out of line, you're getting beat down. No, because even still kind of coming off of that, kids are supposed to be seen and not heard type of thing. I absolutely believe that there is a tough love, especially tough love when you're parents usually feel like you're headed down the wrong path and they're trying to get you back on the path that they feel like you should be on. So they kind of are giving you what they feel like is love. But then as a child, you're just like, oh, that's a bit much. You know what I mean? So then when we kind of segued into that, spankings were a no-no, or, if you're being spanked, that's abuse, call the police, things of that nature. And then, you have this new thing where people are trying the whole soft parenting and stuff like that. I think I fall somewhere in between. I think a lot of people were like, well, I got beaten. Look how I turned out. I'm like, yeah, full of trauma. Full of trauma, because I know there was certain, whoopings that I would get that I'm just looking back on. I'm like, as a mother, I'm like, should I really have gotten whooping for that? You know what I'm saying? Like, and so for me to think about that, all these, years later, to me, that's called trauma. And it's not that that my mom was just going around beating me with stuff or anything. I'm not saying that, but we always say, oh, they did the best that they could. But being a parent now, I'm like, did they? You know what I mean? Because I know I have plenty of room for improvement. But because of the traumas, things that we weren't able to, I mean, there's some household, I'm not saying that all households, but a lot of times because we were seen and not heard, we really didn't have that open dialogue to be able to talk about certain things. As I fast forward and look at how, the way that I am with my kids, they pretty much can talk to me about anything. Not that I couldn't talk to my mom about anything, but it just didn't. She didn't ask, I didn't tell. So, yeah, I absolutely believe in tough love. Do I agree with it? No. I feel like each child is different. So there's no way that you can have a blanketed discipline across the board because that's all you know how, or that's how you were raised. Well, we were raised to everybody's different. And these kids nowadays, you can't haul off and spank them. Y'all gonna be fighting. You know what I'm saying? They're different. You know what I'm saying? So I just really feel like there should be a happy medium in the discipline area. I'm one of those parents that don't believe in beating your kids down. I think that is insane. So what do you feel? Do you think the way that you were raised is the way that you raise your daughter, or do you think that you kind of switch things up because of how you were raised?
Oh man. I love my parents, but I definitely raised her differently from the way that I was raised. Sometimes you are a product of the environment that you come from, and so you'll take on traits from your parents just naturally. You pick things up from them just naturally. But I definitely grew up in a household where spanking was definitely issued out if you weren't getting good grades, or you were misbehaving, or maybe you didn't handle your chores the way that you were supposed to, or something of that nature. And I always felt like when I grew up that, like, once I became a mother, I call it corporal punishment, and people laugh, but I'm serious. Like, I always felt like corporal punishment was just like not the way to raise your kids. Now, I am guilty of, some lectures and raising my voice. I've done that. I'm not gonna, say that I haven't. But when it comes to, just like spanking and the belt, and no judgment on the parents, but I personally do feel that when parents do that, I feel like it's operating from trauma. I feel like it's a trauma response. Essentially, like, maybe you're losing control over something in your household, or your child isn't doing something, the way that you would want them to. Or sometimes, it's out of fear. You might be afraid that they're going down a particular path, and you may want to, circumvent them from doing that. But I feel like you can't teach your children, about respect, and and about love, and safety and protection, if you are taking the position that they should be receiving some kind of an abuse in order for you to facilitate that, right? And we all make mistakes as there's no like perfect roadmap to it. I think that we have to be in self-control. We have to refrain from operating in, temperamental spaces, or out of anger or anxiety or frustration. And I think for the African American community in particular, coming from the history that we have, corporal punishment, I think, is a generational curse that has been passed down to us generation to generation. I mean, there was a point that we were held captive, that that we were instructed to do things and were physically harmed if we didn't, that we kept each other in line in certain spaces while slavery was happening. This was against our ancestors' will. A lot of the ways that they taught them to keep each other in line was through physical force, either forcing physical abuse on them, or teaching them to enforce physical abuse on their families. And so and their friends. And so I feel like that's a message that just keeps getting passed down from generation to generation, and I don't think it's the right one. Another thing is, we have therapy at our disposal now. And so when you're dealing with traumas, or you're having difficulty, these days, a lot of people are trying to seek help. But in generations before us, a lot of times they were just left to deal with those things on their own. I think overall, just taking that standpoint that we need to force someone to do something that they are not willfully able to do, and our action is to kind of do something physically that makes that happen. I just think that that's just not a space that we should be operating from. So I've been totally against it. How do you feel? I mean, some people say that if you don't give them that type of discipline, that oftentimes when you send them out into the world, that's kind of how you see these kids that are completely out of control, that are bullying other people at school, that are, some of those people may turn into people that are bringing, guns to the schools and generating violence and things like. How do you feel overall? Do you feel like that plays a deeper part in society?
I agree with everything that you said. Those are actually my values, and why I didn't go the route of spanking my kids. It's weird, that question, because A lot of those kids that shoot up those schools and stuff, they were either neglected or they were at home abused. Their parents were on drugs. Their parents were either the dad was beating on the mama, the dad was beating on the child, and things of that nature. So I don't feel like those kids that are shooting up the households or those kids that are being bullied are being gently parented. So those, to me, those are not the children that are actually out there doing those things. Because I'm guilty. I'm one of those parents who yells and things like that, and it breaks my heart. I'm like, oh my god, and I feel bad for yelling and things of that nature. But I think that it really has a lot to do with the trauma that I dealt with growing up, not just necessarily the spankings, but not being able to, say the things that I wanted to say or ask the questions that I wanted to ask. So I think that there is a healthy balance between gentle parenting, right? Because I think some of the gentle parenting is just way too far-fetched. Like, come on. But on the other hand, kids are humans as well. So why not sit and talk to them and ask them questions and things like that to get them to actually think about why you took that phone away, or why you have to, come home earlier than your curfew. Just actually sit them down and talk to them. They're like, wow, okay, my opinion matters, or my thoughts matter. My mom genuinely wants to get to know me as a person, to kind of navigate how to handle me or how to deal with when I lash out, or when I don't turn my homework in on time, or when I forgot to take the dog out to use the bathroom and he peed in my room. Speaking from personal experience, if you can tell. But I'm just saying, though, I actually talk to my kids. What can we do so that that won't happen again? And have those conversations and things like that, because they're human. I'm not, even though I am, the parent, that doesn't mean that I'm better than them. You get what I'm saying? I don't want my kids to fear me or to be afraid of me. That, to me, that concept is so outdated and it's so weird to me. I don't want my kids to be afraid of me, because guess what? If they're afraid of me, they're not going to talk to me. And if they can't talk to me, I don't know if someone has harmed them. I don't know if someone has touched them inappropriately, because then they don't want to talk to me about anything. And like you said, that's so that mentality of that beating, right? Because that's what they used to call it, that getting a beating and things like that. What because back then they would make you go grab a switch and all this other stuff. That if you really think about it, that literally mimics being enslaved, and you know um being forced to do something, or hitting you. It's like a lashing and things like that. It's gonna hurt you more than it's gonna hurt me, because that's what they would say, right? No, it doesn't. It actually hurts me more. So, and they say, when you do spank your kids, one of the rules that they tell you, if you're gonna spank your kid, don't do it out of a place of anger. Well, what place is it from? Because every time that I think about it, when I look back, and every time that I got a whooping, my mom wasn't happy. Like, I don't remember her being like, oh yeah, this is great. Come on, let's go ahead and, give you this whooping. There was nothing attached to that was fun. There was nothing attached to that was happy, or anything like that. So if it's not a place of anger, then what is it? I don't know, right? So, but again, that's because she got spankings, and then they got spankings before them, and then before that, they was getting beat. You know what I'm saying? So it is, like you said, it was actually handed down in a way to where, but it made it more justifiable to call it just a spanking, right? Because if you spare the rod, you spoil the child, right? I mean, all of those things are just so barbaric to me, because even my wife, growing up in the South, she used to get paddlings like at school, and I'm just like, what? I'm not one of those kind of parents to take the kid's side of everything like that. But if you hit my kid with any wood and anything, we're fighting. You know what I'm saying? Like, but you can call me and say, hey, they're acting out of line or whatever. Let's have a sit down and stuff like that. And see, that, to answer your question, that's the problem. Parents don't want to hold their kids accountable. Oh, my kid wouldn't do that, or oh, my kid wouldn't, whatever. So that comes with neglect and trying to keep up with the Joneses. I really think that has a lot to do with it. But buying your kids all the lace fashions. I'm not saying don't do those things, but I'm saying that has a lot to do with your kids coming to school, bullying other kids and stuff like that. So you're trying to mask the fact that you're not, paying attention to your kids. So my kids have a happy balance. friends. You know what I'm saying? They know that they can come talk to me about anything. I'm not your friend, but I'm your friend. You get what I'm saying? Do you think that you can have a relationship and a good understanding with your child, of course, one without spanking them and actually sitting there and talking to them, but still having them understand that you are to be respected as the parent?
Yeah, I definitely think you can. I mean, it's interesting because, like, when you're in a partnership, if our partners are not doing what we want them to do or something that we prefer them to do, we look at abuse with our partner as domestic abuse, right? It's not accepted in society at all. It's not accepted in our families at all. If someone's not doing something you want, they're doing something that you don't like, they're not respecting something that you're saying, we still communicate with them. We try to work around it, right? So why would we take any other type of, attitude towards our kids? If anything, we should love them even more abundantly, right? And so when I look at that, what that makes me feel like is when we're looking at kids or children, that we may not be respecting them as the humans, the individuals that they are, right? We're not seeing them for the people that they are. And just because they're small and just because they're young and they haven't lived longer and don't have as much life experience, it doesn't mean that they don't have their own voices and that we shouldn't be listening to how they're feeling or how they're wanting to communicate. Oftentimes when they're smaller, they're not going to know how to communicate the way that adults do. But there's other ways to communicate with your children, and being open with your children and embracing how they feel and embracing how they look at life. And at bare minimum, we should at least be asking them questions, in trying to get them to express what it is that they're either acting out or that they're feeling. And we should care about their feelings. When you look at our society in general, though, it kind of doesn't really have respect for our kids. Like, look at the money that goes into education in our country, compared to the money that goes into other areas like war or, politics or technology. I feel like when we look at our children, I don't know why we do this. I've thought about this a lot. The only thought that keeps coming to mind is that we have a responsibility to our children, and they're more of a financial responsibility, a physical responsibility. They're not contributing to economic growth or stability or wealth. And so it's like, are we minimizing the value of our children because they are not contributing to that yet? Is that the reason why we don't want to hear them out? We don't want to listen to them. We don't want to communicate with them. We don't want to give them the space to speak about their feelings. Is that the reason why we're not investing in their educations, or even some of their programs, their recreational programs or organizational activities, until they're essentially at an age where they're migrating towards the workforce? And so that's a really kind of I think it's a deeper societal problem that we don't really look at children as the individuals that we should. But I think that there are a lot of parents out there that do. And so parents, if you're watching this video, grandparents, if you're watching this video, aunts and uncles, it takes a village to raise a child, drop us a comment. Are you a person that believes that soft parenting, is the healthiest way to parent? Or are you, someone who thinks that, children out there need tough love? Growing up, did you experience soft parenting or did you experience tough love? What's your perspective as far as, parents implementing, behaviors on either sides? We'd love to hear your comments. Maybe drop a comment. Let us know what your thoughts are about this. But I'd love to hear from you, Fancy, just in terms of sort of how you feel maybe this might be impacting our youth and why you think, parents may lean into corporal punishment or tough love opposed to soft parenting.
Yeah, absolutely. To be honest with you, I think that because that mentality of being seen and not heard, right? A lot of parents, they probably would just even, I think we're probably going to get some backlash too about the way that we think of it, because people are so, they come from the old school way of thinking where, especially probably the boys, right? If you don't spank them, they're going to be too soft, right? To be able to go out into the world and, like you said, get them ready for um contributing to society, working, right? Because if you don't spank them or give them that tough love, then they're going to think they can just go out into the world willy-nilly, you know what I'm saying, and be however they want to be. Maybe they're not, maybe you know, on the other side they're like, oh, you're too soft, you know what I'm saying? Because when I was your age, you know, we hear that a lot growing up. When I was your age, I was washing dishes at 2 years old. By the time I was 4, I was walking to the store buying my mom's cigarette. You know what I mean? Like, my kids, to be honest with you, my kids have never even walked to the store by themselves. And I was telling my daughter the other day, like, when we were younger, when we heard, you know, you might have heard, oh, you know, such and such got snatched, and such and such, you were like, oh my God, we didn't go outside for a month. We peeking out the windows thinking somebody was coming to get us. These kids are so desensitized now, to where if they hear something like that, okay, okay, whatever. It's just so normal because everything is such a trend and everything is just so right now, and in your face, and then it passes, you know, things like that.
Right.
I think that's the same way of how we think about excuse me, how we raise them as well. Because if the times have changed like that, don't we think that we should kind of navigate that and kind of change with it? We can't excuse me, my daughters can't get whoopings like I did nowadays. Trust me, these kids will call the police. Like, I'm telling you, they're a lot more savvy, they're a lot more aware, they are a lot more fearless when it comes to being socially aware. Right? We weren't, because again, we were afraid. So, you know what I'm saying? Even if we wanted to call the police, we knew we wasn't it. You know what I'm saying? So it's just like kids are a little bit more socially aware nowadays, to where they know what's right, they know what's wrong. We had a feeling what was right and what was wrong back then, but we wouldn't dare speak on it, right? But these kids nowadays, they're very, I admire them in that way, because they're a little bit more, they have no coof, like the old people would say, right? They have no coof. They're going to tell you, this ain't right. No, I'm not feeling that, or oh, I'm not, whatever, whatever. And sometimes I have to catch myself, because I'm like, what you just say to me? But I'm like, you know what? Yeah, and I have to take a step back. You know what? Okay, let me look at that through different, you know, different eyes, and kind of understand, because like, it has a lot to do with them being socially aware. We weren't so much back in the day. Our parents controlled everything. You don't clean up, you don't get to go outside. Now it's like, you know, if I tell my kids to clean up, they be like, oh, I'll get to it. And I'm like, no, you're going to do it right now. See them, they have phones and stuff. So if you take that phone, they're going to have a conniption. They'll get to cleaning up then. You get what I'm saying? But back then, if you told me I had to sit in the house and you gave me a whooping, I wouldn't do it again. I might do it again maybe a couple months from now, but you know, I wouldn't do it again. But all seriousness, I really feel like people should take a look at what it did to them, and kind of understand what it's doing to their child, or like you said, their grandchild, or who, you know, whoever is raising the child, and just really put in perspective. If it made you feel like crap getting, you know, a whipping or whatever, just imagine, or getting yelled at or getting snapped at for every single thing because your mom or your dad had a bad day. Just imagine how that would make your child feel if you were to treat them as if they didn't matter, or if that they didn't have an opinion or a say in anything that went on in their lives, because it's their lives too. And that's the same thing with you know, some parents being snoop through their kids stuff. Well, this is my house, these are my rules, and these are my. I don't know. I still kind of feel like that's a bit much too. I don't snoop anyway. I'm not a big snooper in anybody's stuff. So I've never been one to walk past my kid's purse and kind of peek in it and things like that, because we've already talked. So what am I going to go look for? Because I trust you. Now, if you're giving me a reason to work, then that's when I'll sit you down. But do you feel like even just trust goes a long way with the kids as well and giving them an opinion? Or do you feel like that it's okay to kind of sneak and look through their stuff? And are you the type to just be like, well, under my roof and this is how it is and you have no say? What do you think about that? Do you think that falls in line with the harsh parenting, and do you find that abusive at all?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, I think you have to respect your children's space. And I think you have to open up the lines of communication with your kids. But I will say that there are times when maybe you're worried about their safety, or you're worried about somebody having access to them that shouldn't have access to them, or that could be in terms of like communication on their technology devices. It could be, maybe they're being exposed to alcohol or drugs or the wrong social group. There's lots of different things. And so as a parent, I do understand how sometimes, like, if you're not getting the answers that you need, and you're worried about your child's safety, there are those kind of like those areas where you may blur the lines and, go into their room and look through certain items. I've definitely felt like there's times when I felt like that, because it's like I'm trying to essentially kind of keep that communication open. But there are also spaces where, I remember when my daughter got her first like computer and her first cell phone, I was like super worried about like, just adults communicating on the internet, and like, how do you can put all the parental controls that you want, but you really facilitate that being the safest space that you want it to be, right? And so it's a tough one. I think, I'm not mad at the parents who are like, hey, I want to make sure my kid's safe, and maybe they're doing things that are a little unconventional to make sure that those environments are safe for their kids. But I ultimately do think that, talking to your kids and keeping communication open with your kids is probably the best way to go about it. And essentially, if your child is struggling, or if something's happened, or they, need to work through particular things, you want them to be able to come to you and have conversations about these things. Because as much as they go to their peers, they're not always going to have, wisdom, presented to them. And you also don't want them to be a person that might kind of be open or subjected to the wrong type of adults, giving it attention. So, it's a really tough space, but I think when it comes down to it, be loving, be understanding to your kids, and do what you feel you need to do to keep them safe and protected, at the end of the day. As long as you're putting them first and you're thinking about their welfare and their mental health, first, then, I would say that you're operating from, a good space. Yeah.
I agree.
Well, I know that that's been, a touchy subject, and I'm pretty sure we're going to hear from, people about their opinions about it. A lot of times there are no right or wrong answers, but it's a conversation that we definitely wanted to have. Please feel free to leave us a comment. Let us know what your thoughts are about the episode. Please make sure that you like and subscribe to our channel, Breaking Black Podcast, on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, Pandora, and Patreon. You've been here with your hosts, Tina G and Fancy Arlee. Please stay tuned for more episodes. Thank you for watching.